at the Ottawa Times, writing, W-R-I-T-E, and she is diligently working on writing her own book. She serves at her husband's church in Marseille as the director of children's ministry, and together they wait to see where the next adventure will take them. So please join me in welcoming Shari to.
So I really just had the opportunity to meet Shari after the fact and did not know what she really did, and met her through going to Harvest. You were at that time there finding out what your next, what Troy's next version of life would be. And so I've been fascinated by her story of life right now, and so then I had the opportunity to learn more about life then. So I would like you to do, because you described yourself as a very average family. So how did you and Troy decide to take 4 kids to Mongolia? And where in the heck is Mongolia? Just to say
My
that.
sister's here, so she can attest that we are an extremely average family. And so where's Mongolia? I can't find it. It is right in between Russia and China. It's this little itty bitty cold desert is what it is. It's an ice cold desert, Mongolia. And I lived right here in the capital city. If you walked outside my door and walked about a mile and a half, all that you're seeing is Siberia, which is where they send prisoners when they do wrong things. So I don't know if that was my punishment or not. And then why did we decide to go to Mongolia? We were just on a path in our life where we were looking for, God's will for our life. What would be the next steps for us? My husband owned his own business. I really was, and I don't say just, but really was a soccer mom. I mean, I lived my life.
Tell them where you live, because some people will know, they don't know where you live.
We lived in Lake Holiday in Salmonac, in a little ranch house that my husband built for us. That was my dream house with my dream kitchen. I did not have these high aspirations. I was not like Rebecca. Where's Rebecca? I was not like you, wanting to travel or anything like that. I did not even have a passport. We did have hopes to reach our community, so we did whatever we could in the local community in Salmonac, as far as working with the school and working in our local church as youth leaders. And we wanted to help mission programs, so we gave our money. My husband had his business, and he would take part of his salary and give it to some type of organization around the world. We had several countries that we gave to, and none of them were Mongolia. So really, literally out of the blue in our life, we felt that the Lord called us to sell our house and move to Mongolia.
I know you said, should I share that? I think you should share how it came about.
Okay. When people say God told me, it's kind of scary, because we all have heard stories of things that God has told people to do, supposedly, that were just awful and horrific. So I don't like to throw that out there into a room when I don't know a lot of you, and people can make assumptions about it, but it's my story. So for us, I was helping at Harvest Chapel as a youth leader, and I was away for the weekend with 75 youth, and I was not a good chaperone. I was like escaping the fun things they were doing and going off across the hall of the RCA Superdome in Indianapolis, where they were having a missions conference. And it was full of all these booths of people that were doing amazing things around the world to help reach impoverished families, trafficking, and I would walk these booths, and I mean hundreds of them, and just feel like a sense that something was happening in my life. So that night, I asked God, can you still use me? Can you do something with me like that? And I actually imagined myself as like an old lady with a cane, because I had 4 little kids, like finally eventually going off to the mission field somewhere. And I felt the Lord speak to me and say, trust Troy. And that is my husband's name, by the way. And that seems like an odd thing, but I felt it really strong in my heart. While I was gone, and I did not realize it, my husband was, because this was before like Wi-Fi and all that stuff, so we weren't like calling each other all the time while I was traveling. He was at home still working. And he was wrapping up his morning time, and he felt the Lord say, sell your house and get ready to move to Mongolia. And he thought, I don't think I can tell Shari that, because she will think I have lost my mind. And so Mongolia was strange, because we didn't, like I said, we weren't working with anybody there, we weren't supporting any missions there, we didn't actually know anything about Mongolia. So it is as weird as it sounds, and it was that weird to us as well. We weren't people that were hearing like voices from heaven saying to do things, so it was very strange for us. He went and talked to his pastor, our pastor at the time, right away, and when I came back from that trip, he just said, hey Shari, has God like been talking to you at all? And I said, yeah, he's actually been telling me to trust you. And I don't know what I'm supposed to trust you with, but whatever, I trust you. And if you know my husband, he's like very stoic. And he like totally came alive, like eyes big. You know Troy, he's not very animated. He's my opposite. And he said, I've got something to tell you that is just gonna rock your world. It's gonna scare you, but don't panic. Well, no wife wants to hear this. And so I just said, what? And it took him some time to get it out, but he said, I feel like God's calling me to sell our house and move to Mongolia. And I don't know why, I have no answers for you. But let's start praying about it and see what God might do. And that is really how it started. And within 17 months, we were getting off the plane with our 4 kids at minus 55 degrees in Mongolia. Yeah.
Describe the day that you left from here to go there.
And Joanne, I think Jenny, you might have been there too, I'm not sure. But anyway, when we walked out of our house, and got into a van, we had so many people. We left at like 5 in the morning. We had so many people from our community show up. Our house, we have video of it, was just like packed solid of, tears, people saying goodbye. And we were so blessed by the community reaching out to us, because when something like this happens, it kind of shakes a small community. I mean, either that family went nuts, or God is doing something really cool and we don't know what to do with it, And so we were so blessed that so many people showed up. But then when we got in the van and started driving down the driveway, because at that time we were living in the country, the driveway was about a quarter mile long. And it was just lined with people from Salmonok, from our church, from our community, with signs saying, we love you, we're gonna miss you. And I remember my husband looked over and he goes, I think they think we're gonna die. So we just had this overwhelming support behind us. People just got behind us and they believed in what we were going to attempt to do and wanted to cheer us on. Most people did.
Most people. And
Yeah.
some, they said, we're going to send X amount of dollars to you, or?
Unbelievably so, people started signing up, like, we'll send $10 a month to help you with what you want to do. Because at that time we knew that we were going to go work with street kids. So there were children that were living underground, because it's the coldest capital. So under the ground, there are big hot water pipes that run through the city. So the kids all go under there. They call them the sewer kids. And at that time, there were over 4,000 sewer kids like living under the ground. And there weren't a lot of aid organizations working. So people heard that story and were like, we want to help you. So our friends, our neighbors, our church, we had a list of people offering $10, $15, $25 a month. And that was our base support, because we couldn't work while we were there. You couldn't get a job visa or work visa there. And so
when you left, how long did you think you'd stay?
I really thought 6 months. This is a test. God is testing me, like you read about in the Bible and those big stories. I couldn't imagine my entire life being away from my family and my community. I mean, ladies, I planted lilac bushes from little seedlings outside my window, because my dream was for my kids to grow up and take their prom pictures in front of those lilac bushes. That was kind of as big as my dreaming was. And so I just could not imagine a lifetime away from that.
Use that one in your book. Okay. What was it like when you arrived 55 below zero in Mongolia? Because your expectations of what it were different than what it was.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. Like, I imagined, okay, you read these books about people that are doing these amazing things, and you kind of, you put them up. and you think they have some kind of superpower or something great happens to them. So I imagined I was gonna get off the plane and somehow like the cape was gonna land on me, like your cape that you had, and I was gonna have like this energy or whatever, something was gonna happen to make it okay. But it wasn't. It was so scary. And I was so far out of my comfort zone, like a fish out of water does not even begin to describe it. Other language that I have no concept for, but not only that, we're moving into the slums. So the slums are, it's no running water, outdoor pit toilets. I had told my family about it for years, and finally my sister Joanne came to visit me, and I remember the night we're driving up to my house, she goes, "Oh my goodness, you really do live in the slums." And it was like you see on TV. And so seeing this for the first time, it's like a huge slap of reality to me. Because I had seen pictures of where we were gonna live, and I had a list. My husband was a carpenter. And I was like, you're gonna put in new floors, we need a hallway there, I need some cabinets, because there was like one little cabinet sitting up in the corner. And that was my mentality. But then I get there and I see my neighbors. My neighbors are literally freezing to death, literally. I mean, they were tearing down parts of my fence to keep them warm some nights. And I see what's happening around me, and suddenly like all that just, I can just describe it, it's like in an instant, it just falls away. And I'm like, the cabinet's fine, I don't need anything. So it was a process though. It was a process to overcome, and I can only describe it as like a terror, okay? Because I've got my 4 little precious kids.
Tell them the ages.
So when we went, our oldest was 15. So we had a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old when we went.
How do they all feel?
Also terrified. And this is an important part that as I was getting ready to leave, I got some advice from some amazing women. One of them had grown up as a missionary child. And she had taken me aside one day and she's like, "Shari, your children's happiness is not your top priority any longer." And that kind of made me mad because they were my focus, they were my life. You know, like we want our kids to be happy. She said, your top priority is doing what God has called you to do, which is obviously going to be a sacrifice, and then loving them. Love them, be there for them, but they might not be happy. And they weren't. So the very first night, I love to tell the story, we get down, you know, everybody gets into bed, and it's awkward. You know, we're like, what are we doing? Are we playing? Is this a terrible dream? Am I going to wake up? And my son Joe starts crying, Joey, tender-hearted Joey. And he's the 10-year-old, and he just bawls his eyes out. We calm him down. Sarah starts crying. Trevor, the 15-year-old, starts crying. Ellie starts crying. I start crying. And then Troy's basically crying because we're all crying, you know? And it didn't go away. Those tears lasted, for my son Joey, it lasted about an entire year of crying himself to sleep from what he had lost. And so I need to say, in all of our leadership roles, there's a sacrifice that we make. Our families feel it, our children feel it too, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong or that it's not okay for them not to be happy all the time. Yeah.
Okay. So, how did you start the process? Because you said what your imagination of what the people were like was different, like the clothing. Like I loved that story about what they taught you about that.
Okay, so you think you're going to go work in the slums. You have an image in your head of what the poor people are. And I know that sounds blunt, but that's kind of how I was thinking. And then I get there, and these women are, I mean, drop dead gorgeous, and the men as well, as far as how they take care of themselves. So they're coming out of these little one-room huts is what they're living in. The sun comes up in the morning, and they start coming out, and they are dressed like, literally like they're coming off the runway. High heels in icy hills with, you know, there's not any salt getting poured down for them. The best dressed, whitest shirts, pressed, clean clothing. And I was a little embarrassed because I didn't bring any clothes along like that. And as I got into the process of learning the culture that I was in, I learned that they really believed put your best self in front. And they might have only owned one outfit, but they took super great care of it. And they wore it out, and when they walked out that door, they wanted to present themselves so that they could get respect. So it's a lot like what you were saying actually today.
Wow. You mentioned that I want to say there was a whole process because there wasn't an organization that you were going into that had started something that you could just jump in and continue to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You said there was like a little skeleton, but your purpose for being there, nobody established. How did you start from nothing? You couldn't speak the language, you didn't know anybody that was there. What did you do to get this started?
So the organization we went to work for was called Flourishing Future, and it was, like you said, just a skeleton of an organization, nothing really there. They had 2 employees, but they were actually on their way out at the time. And I got a knock on my gate after being there about 3 days, and it's this tiny little young woman, and she has a pretty broken English, but she introduces herself. She's like, "Hi, my name is Tusha. I am your neighbor. I live right down the road, and I believe you must be one of those people that believe in God, because why else would you be here?" She had met traveling missionaries that had come through. That's how she even knew about it. And she was like, I really want to help you. As a trade, I would like you to teach me a little bit more about your Bible, because I have translated for these foreign missionaries, but I don't understand it very well. And I will help you learn how to live here. So she's the one that taught us how to go get water, how to go to the store and find something other than ramen noodles, because we were just eating bags of noodles every single day. That's all I could find. And so she taught me how to shop. She taught me how to integrate into the culture. And not just her, the whole community. It's gonna make me cry, but they just came around us and were like, "You people need help, please." I know you think you're helping us, but we really need to save you guys. And they just came around us and started to embrace us and teach us how to acclimate into that culture and to survive.
How big was that? Because you tell this country and then where you were, how big
Okay,
was
so there's 3.5 million people, that's it, in all of Mongolia. 2.5 million live in the capital city. And then the slum district, the capital city runs along in the middle of a valley, and then the slum district is 25 miles up the side of a long mountain range. And so there are over 800,000 people living in complete, total, poverty that hurts to look at. And then we were reaching a community of about 500 people to start with. Yeah.
And so as they helped you so you could survive, what did you start, what programs did you start for them, and how did you do that?
My husband, and again, he started out as a carpenter and a leader of a team at work, but he took on this new project of how do I really reach out to this community. And he had a brilliant idea to, let's get them all together. Let's get the leaders of the community together and start asking them, like, what do you need? Because we don't know what you need. We think you need different things that have probably not even crossed their minds that they needed. And so we just started having community meetings where we would sit down and say, what is the real problem here and how do you think we can help? They came up with amazing ideas, and we started to put all their ideas together. And
how many were there? You said how it started and then it grew.
yeah, we hired one person because that's all we could afford at first. And then we started adding them on, because remember the people back home that were supporting us, they were really supporting us. It was amazing. They would say, they'd start sending in a lot more than just $5 a month, $10 a month. So financially we were starting to expand. And then as we brought in the team, we brought in the community leaders and also people that were also really suffering and struggling. And that's who we hired as our core team. And eventually about 7 people that were the ones that helped start and make the decisions. And then it ended up expanding out to 17. So we had 17 employees that came from that community. They weren't coming from the outside wearing fancy, driving fancy cars, and they were living there. And then they were the ones that began to teach us how to help them.
And you said some starving to death, social programs. How did you decide you still only have so much money?
Yeah, well, and this is the biggest miracle of all, is we would have people coming from the outside, other countries, that would hear about our work. Oh, there's this, and I hate it, but it was true. There's this crazy American family working up in the slums. You gotta go see what they're doing, because they're really starting to change the community. And I don't really think it was us, you know what I mean? Like our whole Mongolian team that started to deeply impact the community. And the Gare district is what it's called. Our area of the Gare district, those 500 people, became so different that it got outside of attention from the Mongolian government as well. What is happening there? Because you people are different. And so they started sending out people to see us, and some of them were very wealthy people and we didn't know it. And they spend a couple hours with us, see our work, and then leave a check for $20,000 and say, we want to invest in what you're doing. And those checks would get bigger and bigger and bigger until the organization just really grew. So it became easier to make those decisions because we did have the money to do it with.
Now this is very interesting because you told me that even growing up in Salmonak, you were not a leader.
Yeah, no.
And you were certainly not somebody that could fundraise.
No.
So could you share that transformation? In fact, you said something about yourself. What did you call yourself?
I don't know. What did I call myself?
Yes, you said when you were the imposter.
Yeah, imposter syndrome. I don't know. Maybe some of you deal with that from time to time. But there are times when I will get up to speak in front of a group of people, and that feeling will come. They don't know who you really are. If they knew who you really are and what you really, that you don't know what you're doing. And I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't a leader, and I was quite shy actually most of my life. And it was a couple of women in my life that told me I was a leader. I mean, starting with my mom, she'd tell me I was a leader, but you don't really believe your mom, right? She'd say you're a leader because people are following you, Shari. People are following you and people are asking you questions, But I really did not see myself that way. And it wasn't until in my mid-20s, I had a woman come and ask me to lead a group at church. And she said, I want you to lead this mom's group. And I thought, no, I can't lead a mom's group. My kids are crazy. Nobody's gonna follow me, And she's like, no, really, I really think you can do this. I see this in you. And I just remember that feeling of being told someone saw something in me that maybe I knew was there, maybe, but I would never have said it out loud. But someone else noticing it, it just made all the difference. And that was my first step into leading another group of women. And then as I did that, you get more confidence, right? And then more people come to you and say, hey, will you lead this? And will you be on this board? And will you do this? And before you know it, you're building your confidence as well in what God can do through you. But still today, there are that little voice that will sometimes grab a hold of me and say, you don't know what you're talking about.
So you say you did a mom's group, and then what did you do in Salmonak?
I was on like the Salmonak Education Boosters Board as a secretary. Yeah.
Okay, she was the secretary there. We have another jump in leadership. Now describe the day when you went to Hong Kong and were put on the top floor of one of the most incredible buildings in Hong Kong in a room full of businessmen.
Yeah.
The woman who was not the leader.
Yeah.
Tell about that.
Again, that's another, and I'm using the same word. I am a writer, but I keep saying the same word, terror, okay? I just felt terror, and I'm sitting there.
How did you get there? Tell how you got there.
We were invited because of the people that were coming up and seeing our work, and met people that, and again, you would meet people and you don't realize, you don't know who they are and what they've got behind them and what their story is. And so we just happened to meet the person that was the head of the charity sector of CLSA Bank in Hong Kong. And she said, come on out, we really want you to present. I didn't understand what that meant. I'm so clueless about fundraising at this point. I just know I have to show up because I've been asked. And, talk about searching for the right dress, it was miserable. but, getting to Hong Kong, getting into that building and just knowing I don't belong here, but I do. Because God has allowed me to be here. He's allowed me to be here. And you know what? For that, I'm going to take what I can get from it because he's giving me this opportunity. There's no other way I could have made it into that room. And when I walk in and the whole, it's one of those long tables, all these executives in suits sitting there staring at me, and realizing, don't be afraid, Shari, because they want to know what you have to say. They are looking at you as the expert because you are. They've never done what you're doing, and they want to hear your story. They want to hear about the children. They want to hear about the work that you're doing. And being able to be filled with that confidence at that table, it was one of the scariest moments of my life, though. For about 10 seconds, I contemplated jumping out the window.
I don't know if this happened before or after, but I would like you to tell them about that little girl's shelter called the Desert Rose. If you could share how that came into your life and what you did with it.
Yeah, and so my husband's work was with Flourishing Future. By now it's grown. We have a staff. We're fundraising for that. And I really became, without knowing it, I was really like, the development director. But I didn't call myself that. I just called myself the helper at the time. And really raising all those funds for that. Well, there was one girl shelter in Mongolia, only one. And it was called Desert Rose. It was run by a missionary who was absolutely exhausted beyond her belief. She had no funding. She had nobody behind her backing her. She didn't have the long line of people, waving her goodbye. And so she was gonna leave the country and just shut it down. She and I met together about how I was gonna help her in that process to shut the organization down. Now that's a painful conversation to think you're working with these trafficked girls. And at the time the youngest girl was 4 and the oldest girl was 14. And thinking about what are we gonna do with these girls? How are we gonna do this? And as we were planning it and using all of our intelligence that we could come up with at the time on how we could do this right, I said, hey, I think we need to pray about this. I think we are missionaries, we probably should pray. And so we just held hands and prayed and asked God what to do. The thought came to me, you're not closing it down, you're gonna take it. And I remember looking over at my husband and saying, I think that I'm going to take Desert Rose. And he just shook his head like, oh boy, because this just does not make sense on paper to fundraise for 2 big organizations or big projects. But he said, Shari, if you're gonna do it, do not chase the money and don't make decisions based on the money. Make decisions based on where you know that God is leading you and be confident in it. And I took that to heart. We had $300 in the account when I took the organization and no groceries. I remember the first miracle that happened after saying, yes, I will do it, was our church back home, Harvest Chapel. It was Mother's Day weekend, and I needed about $3,000 to make the rent, to move the girls into a nicer place, which I really felt I was supposed to do. And I didn't tell anybody it's what I needed. I didn't have time yet. And I get a phone call, or not a phone call, I get an email from our pastor saying, hey, we took a Mother's Day offering, and it's about $3,700, and we're gonna send it over to you for that new project that we know that you're gonna be doing. And so that was my first miracle. It was like, again, that confidence builder. I can do this, because I'm not doing it alone. And that house is still running today, and it's running so well that the government has started to use our house.
Now, wait a minute.
Go ahead, yes.
Because you said they don't understand what these kids are like. And you didn't just go in and take the house and now it's all great.
Yeah, no.
No. What'd you do, really? Describe what these young girls, 4 to 14.
These are children that have, been trafficked. They've been prostituted by their parents. And also living out on the street, eventually running away from that, and then prostituting themselves. And we're talking about 4 or 5-year-olds. I had a group of little girls that wouldn't stop smoking. They were 4 years old. And I remember how funny it was. My solution that I came up with was to let them smoke, because they were running away when I made them stop smoking. I don't want them back on the street. They're too young to make these decisions. And so we would literally have smoking time for 4-year-olds. They would go outside and have their little cigarettes, and then we would wean them down over a month or 2 months, and then so they could let it go and they could stay. So I'm dealing with girls, again, I grew up in a very bubble, shelter, beautiful life. I don't understand this. I had to learn everything from scratch. I did not go to school to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. So I was telling Jeanie, I just became like an absorber, like a sponge for any kind of book I could get my hands on about orphans, street kids. If you guys could see like what comes up on my Facebook feed for advertisements, it's quite crazy. But, and YouTube videos. I learned a lot from YouTube videos. You know, video, searching who has done this before and how did they make it work, and getting all that advice from people that way. And so little by little, we started to make it a safe house and make it a home for girls. And we had to refuse to take any more than 24. Our ultimate goal was to take 12 because we were trying to break away from institutions and make it into more of a home. And that was a brand new concept in Mongolia. And so that was a hard choice, you know, because imagine you're the only girls' shelter in a city with all these street children. You're saying no to a lot of kids. And that was heartbreaking, but again, it was like, but if I invest in these, it's gonna be worth it. And I can really invest in them if I keep my numbers low.
So sometimes you would work at, like, when you say their parents did it to them, that's really hard for these people to comprehend.
Yeah.
Why was it that those parents did that?
You know, as we got more involved in that, we started to learn that the girls actually wanted to go home. They wanted to be with their moms. They wanted to be with their dads. Doesn't matter how big of a monster I think their parents are, that's where their heart is. So we started to take it even a little bit further. Let's get to know the families. Let's find out why would you send your child out to be trafficked? And realizing that these are extremely impoverished families that have also grown up in that way. You know, they grew up being prostituted by their parents, or having just to work all their lives for money, for food. And so learning that there's a story behind them too. And so how do we solve that problem? And we ended up starting a tortilla making factory inside of our kitchen, where we would hire the moms and they would come and make tortillas, which was like a brand new food in Mongolia. So it was super hot item, especially for the expats living there. And started selling to restaurants and giving them some money and giving them some dignity, giving them a job, at the same time doing family counseling. And for most of the girls, we could return them to their families and to their homes after about a year. And they would stay home, and their parents would stop doing what they were doing.
But she doesn't say that, she just said, so the whole process came from what she was learning and then teaching and then sharing, but that didn't work for everybody because there was a little 3-year-old.
Yeah, there were children that their parents did not want them. Their parents were like, I hate them, I don't like them, if you bring them back, I will kill them. And so we would keep the children there. And so for those girls, that's their home even today. That's where they're living now.
Okay, and you mentioned that this unique concept of a small group of kids in a home was different than Mongolia was handling, because they were handling orphans. What did they do?
In an institution where, you know, you have a room like this and it's just lined with beds and it's just very institutionalized, and the children are a number basically. And so this concept came under pressure. You know, what are you guys really doing with these girls? Why are you bringing them into a little home like this? And it was hard for the Mongolians to accept, but they did accept it. And today, that the main state orphanage has now been broke down into, they have remodeled the entire inside, which is something else that we were able to help fundraise for. So that now, instead of big lined up beds, they have little houses within the orphanage. And so it's a mom and a dad type that are staying in the house, and they'll have 4 to 6 children inside the house with its own kitchen, and trying to make it a little bit more like a family for them. They have definitely seen how it made a difference when the children left the orphanage. And so they're doing it now.
I believe that meant that the government maybe even gave an award.
Yeah, I got an award from the same government who made every day extremely hard for me when I was first starting out. I was constantly under investigation. And when I say constant, I mean it was like like once a week, full-on investigation, police, people questioning me. It was hard, it was really hard, but I knew that we had to just keep pressing forward. And so before I left, I got an award from the Mongolian Children's Foundation saying, you know what, you have made a lasting legacy impact in Mongolia. And this is coming from the lady who just wanted to have lilac bushes out front of my house.
So there was also an impact because I really love the story about how one decision can affect a nation. And it was your staff member. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah.
The little one that started out?
The little one who came to my gate, Tusha, she absorbed everything that we were doing. She was our very first hire. So we only had $130 to pay her a month, because remember, this is the early days, you know. And she had actually at the time, and I won't say the organization, but there was a well-known organization that could pay her $500 a month. And I said, take it, you know, you gotta have that. And she said, no, I believe in what you guys wanna do, and I like your approach, and I wanna get behind you and help you. So she came on as our first staff member, and followed that down through the years where she started out as my translator, and then she became assistant to the director, and then she became the director of our student program. And she ended up getting a scholarship from Wheaton College, where she came back a year and a half ago and got her master's degree in student ministries and returned again to Mongolia, and is now working for the Mongolian government, having opportunities to change the laws for children in Mongolia. And that was just my neighbor.
And that little 3-year-old, you said she had connected with this little girl?
So the little 3-year-old, looking at Tusha, just seeing who Tusha was. You know, Tusha was her role model, much more than me. You know, they used to call me the scary yellow-haired lady at first. With a big nose. They often told me how big my nose was. And you should see all the art that they've drawn. But they were able to identify with Tusha because she's from their community, and she was able to speak in those early days, especially before I got the language. She was able to really connect with them and speak life. When you speak life into a child that has had nothing good spoken to them, I mean, it just takes a drop, and it's like they're, you know, it's amazing. And she believed that Tusha was pretty much God, and decided that she was going to work hard. Now, this is the one whose mother did not want her. She said, I'm going to work hard to be the smartest person in my class, because the smartest person in the class is the person that everybody follows, and I want to lead people like Tusha leads people. And she's doing that. I mean, she's getting all the awards in school now. She's in high school now, and she is at the top of her class. And I don't know what her story is going to end like or become, but I do know that it's going to be beautiful, and I can't wait to find out. And to think that I had a little piece of that, and I could have stayed in Samanak, and I probably would have had a great life, and my kids wouldn't have cried themselves to sleep for a year. But so much I would have had to miss out on as well.
So what happened to make Troy say, we're going home?
Yeah, so then again, our organization's grown. We have funding that, I mean, seriously, where we're really dreaming now. It's not just paying the bills. Now we're dreaming. Now we're planning big. And so we had decided to start expanding to South Sudan, because by then we're kind of addicted. We're like, people would call us poverty experts. I don't know if you want that title, but that was the title that we had. So we would get asked to travel all over the world to speak about poverty to groups of people that were wanting to make a difference and an impact. And so we decided to move to South, we were gonna plan a little mini trip to South Sudan to check it out and see what we could possibly do to start expanding there. While we were on that trip, while he was on that trip, again, I was back in Mongolia, just still working there. And during my prayer time, I, again, felt something in my heart say, I'm wrapping up your time in Mongolia. And I thought, no way, you would not do that. Like, if I was God, I would not do that, because I'm at the top of my game now. You know? I'm not doing it. But I just wrote it in my journal, and I thought, I'm not going to say anything about it. Well, a war broke out in South Sudan while my husband was there, so he ended up being held in a UN compound. Having a chance talk about a God thing, to talk to all of the major leaders of all the aid relief organizations that he never would have had a chance to meet with otherwise. But in that time, he began to feel God telling him, there's a finish line. And so he called me and said, I had something to tell you. He said, I know we're thinking about expanding, but I think there's a finish line. And I said, I know, I wrote it down in my journal, and I opened my journal, and I told him. So just like God put us on the same page to get to Mongolia, because that's really what it would have taken, you guys. If God hadn't spoke to me, I'm not the kind of person who would just blindly follow my husband to Mongolia. I really followed okay? So he put us on the same page again, and we began the process then of, well, do we want to stay if we know that God's kind of like maybe saying it's done? I don't think we want to keep in a project that his hands are not on anymore. Because it was clearly his blessing that gave us so much prosperity while we were there. And so we started to make the plan to come back here, back to Samanak without a job. I mean, and what do you do after that experience coming back to Samanak? It was quite scary.
How long was that total time you were there?
Just about 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you catch that? That was weird.
When did you come back?
So the child that was 5 came back when she
Oh,
was
yeah. Right?
15, right?
14,
14 or
yeah.
15, having lived in.
What about your oldest? Did he come back earlier?
He came back, so with the one that was 15 when we got back, my mom was sick and we came back to visit her. And on that trip, he turned 18. And so on his 18th birthday, he came home, 3 days before we were supposed to return to Mongolia and said, I joined the army. He joined the military. And the kids, it is a huge part of their story now. I'm so glad we did not pull them out when they were crying themselves to sleep every night, because it was too hard, to see your kids suffer. It's one thing when you're suffering, but you really feel guilt when your kid's suffering because you're doing something. But I'm so glad we did not, because it is a huge part of their story and it's part of who they have become. And not all of it good. For some of them, trust me, they definitely need therapy. And some of them are in therapy. They need therapy. There was a lot that we went through. But there's also a lot of good that came from it for my kids.
I'll just say, what do you have right here?
Yeah, I wanted to show this. This is a Mongolian Kazakh quilt, and actually Jenny and Joanne came to Mongolia to visit me. They bought me this quilt while they were there, because I never would have paid for it. It was very expensive. But they knew I loved it. And what makes it so awesome is, see the bottom? That's not finished, right? And it's because the Kazakhs say, life is an unfinished project. We are constantly reinventing ourselves, redoing it, starting over, getting better and better and better. And it's an unfinished project. So when I see this, I see hope for someone like me, the Lilac Girl, to affect another government across the ocean. I mean, it's an unfinished project. Whatever you think you are right now, there's more. There's so much more. Yeah.
And may I finish this by saying, no, you stand up. Because when I met with her last week, after I listened to this story, what I said to her was, what are you going to do next? Because you have a God-given potential to do something that is going to blow us away, and you better figure out what that is, and you better finish what you're capable of doing.
Amen.
Give her a hand.
Lisa Goodman, did you feel inspired?
Yeah. Totally.
Very, my gosh, what a wonderful day.
Yeah.
So we're